Thanks for tuning into another edition of Another Dolphins podcast. And while we don't have any games to talk about, these are some of my favorite shows. Each of the last 3 years, Josh and I have gotten together. We put our brain power together to put together a little book club. I think, Josh, it was during the pandemic. We decided that we wanted to kind of try to present information a different way. So we started a little series where we dive in onto a specific player joining the Miami Dolphins. And this way we can kind of go a little deeper than, that intro article we've all written or even read about each of these players. Before we get into this, Josh, just to kind of go back into the Wayback Machine, I think this is where we truly fell in love with Jalen Phillips, hearing his story about how much of a monster and how much he overcame, at UCLA. We really got to dig in last year, or it might have even been 2 years ago. I remember really figuring out that Chase Edmonds wouldn't be a fit for the Dolphins when we're talking about the inside zone versus that outside zone scheme that Mike McDaniel loves oh so much. But Joshua, I got to stop talking for a minute. You can tell I'm already excited about this book club, but how you doing today, brother?
I'm doing good, man. And you said going way back. I think we even did a Zach Sealer one. That's how far back we went. So I think you even joked it was during the pandemic, and I just had my second daughter, and I think it would be do this in between nap time. So it was a nursery book club we started. So yeah, we dive into a player. So I'm excited to be able to come on here and do this, throughout this slow time. But we call it a slow time, and Mike McDaniel had a presser today. I think they're working out there in Miami Gardens. So during this slow time, that's not so much slow time. But how have you been, Jake? It's been a little bit since we got on here and talked about our team we loved.
I'm good, man. Had the long weekend. I hope everybody was able to rest up, relax, and enjoy the extra time off. And really, I'm looking for that next opportunity to get a tan, right? Living up here in the Northeast, everybody flocks to the beaches. Everybody flocks to the lakes. So you got to be a little creative to go out and do some things, whether it's frisbee golf, a little frolf action, slap some chains, but you got to do things a little different than living in South Florida, being at the beach. But we'll get there by the end of the summer. Whether it's going to watch some adult softball games, we'll get that tan by the end of the summer. That's my goal here, Joshua. I wanted to ask you, should we keep it called the Nursery Book Club, do you think? Since it is the School of Houtz, I figured I wanted to ask you if we graduated. I'm fully down to be the Nursery Book Club, but I'm always wondering if that, what it'd come off as. So if you're ready to continue the Nursery Book Club, I will jump in with you.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm okay if we knock that nursery part off and just get back to being a book club, make this more of our chapter books that we used to do. I think we even labeled them, chapter 1, Jalen Phillips. So yeah, I don't even think my kids nap anymore. So I have a 2-year-old, I have a 4-year-old, my 6-year-old's at school. I'll have 2 in school next year. So we will have more time to do this, Jake. But yeah, we'll take the nursery part away because naps, those are a thing of the past.
So we truly buried the lead here. We're going to get super jazzed up about Jordan Poyer, former Buffalo Bills safety. But real quick, one final thing before we get into that. If you love video games, if you're a big old nerd like the rest of us, we are giving away a copy of College Football 25, and it is very, very easy to enter this giveaway. All you have to do, send us a question. Let us know what you think about Jordan Poyer. Let us know if there's another player you'd like us to do a book club on. Send us one email with your thoughts to AnotherDolphinsPodcast@gmail.com. Not the smoothest email address, I know, but I put it in the description of each and every show. And on top of that, if you're desperate, if you had to pay rent and you want to make sure you can get your copy of College Football 25, you get 2 additional entries if in that email you include a screenshot of you rating the show on your app of choice. I believe we're going to be doing a mailbag show for early next week, and we'll go through this, send out the call one more time, but we'd love to make sure we get a copy of College Football 25 on your preferred system in your hands, so be sure to reach out with questions. Joshua Houtz, the Miami Dolphins, I mean, how often when you sign a player to a 1-year, $2 million deal, how much should you really care about something like that?
Yeah, I mean, I think in the past, I don't think we'd care at all, right? We'd be sitting here saying he's coming in as depth or this, that, and the other thing, but it's just crazy, how much of a 180 it has been since I think a year before that when, he wanted a lot of money. I think he went back and stayed with Buffalo, but yeah, man, to sign Jordan Poyer for 1 year, $2 million, a guy who obviously wants to be here. I mean, we'll talk about it. He's 33 years old. His better days are probably behind him, but he can still play football and he wants to be here. And let's be honest, he still hasn't won anything with the Buffalo Bills. So he's coming here for a reason. Let's be honest.
Dude, that is absolutely perfect. A friendly little reminder there. So yeah, just looking at it for the 2024 season, Miami's top 51 players account for $231 million against the salary cap. And Jordan Poyer is a player, a four-time team captain, 2021 All-Pro safety. I think this kind of love affair, I'll even call it, Josh, started last year, where I think Jordan Poyer was doing about a live stream or something. And he was talking about the possibility of playing for Miami. He talked about how much he enjoyed Tua, which that shouldn't really be a reason why a defender picks to play with the team, but all the power for them. Instead, Poyer decided to sign a 2-year, $12 million deal to go back to the Buffalo Bills last offseason. But Josh, looking back, this kind of seemed like it was a move made to happen. Poyer never really hit his love, his feeling of just wanting to play for the Dolphins. He had a quote where he, lives 20 minutes away. He watched them all throughout the Ryan Tannehill years, just kind of seeing how the Dolphins do. And it was kind of a goal of his to, quote unquote, in a way, come back home and play in Miami.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up because I think then Mike McDaniel was also asked about it at one point. He was all, couldn't say anything because he didn't want to, I guess, get caught with tampering. As we know, the Miami Dolphins are the only team that does that. But it's just nice to have a guy and just for things to and the perception to have changed, right? These players want to come to Miami. They've built that bond, whether it was in those rivalries between Mike McDaniel's Dolphins and the Bills or whatever it was. He wanted to come here and play with the Dolphins. I mean, part of it is not going to do us any favors in the whole people want to go to Miami to retire because I mean, that's kind of what he's doing here, but he will be out there, most likely starting. I mean, unless the Dolphins do something crazy, right? Jordan Poyer and Jevon Holland are the Dolphins starting safeties. So you bring in a guy who, again, you mentioned had that captain, has wore that captain. I mentioned still has yet to win the big one. He wants to play for Miami. You mentioned he lived right down the street. People are still getting a little upset because he says that Josh Allen's the best quarterback, but I'm good with this. I'm good with Jordan Poyer. No one could be upset for 1 year, $2 million, but at the same time, you do got to temper your expectations a little bit. But he's ready to play, man. He sounds like he's hungry, and the Dolphins have to have a plan in place for him, right, Jake?
That's kind of the key here. And thinking about what the Dolphins were last year, we were pretty happy with what we got out of Deshaun Elliott. We weren't expecting too much. I think everybody hated him the instant he got here because he spent a whole day. I think it was a single tweet campaigning about Lamar Jackson being the next quarterback of the Miami
Dolphins. It was just a retweet, I think. He just retweeted it, and everyone just hated him after that.
Oh man, dude, it's still so funny to me. And I thought Elliott played well, and I thought what both Jevon Holland and Deshaun Elliott and Brandon Jones eventually had to do in the Vic Fangio system, I thought it worked pretty well. I thought Holland last year got to be pretty flexible. 362 snaps at free safety, 211 in the box, 121 at slot corner. When we talk about, I think, the Vic Fangio conundrum of how he wasn't putting players in the best situation to succeed, I think Jevon Holland is maybe the one exclusion from that because he was lining up all over the field. He was asked to do a lot of different things, but at the same time, we saw the weakness of the Vic Fangio system. We have Jalen Ramsey that can go up against your top dog, and we're going to keep him on your top dog. That doesn't necessarily mean we're going to shadow, but what we're going to do is we're going to put him on the boundary where your quarterback's most likely to look. The issue we saw with the Vic Fangio defense is that if you're just playing a hat against a hat type game, eventually you're going to get down to your third cornerback, your third safety, and find that weakness. And we saw that happen against Buffalo. We definitely saw that happen against Baltimore. And that isn't something that Jordan Poyer isn't going to replace on the surface. But man, I'm very impressed watching film of a 32-year-old play football. Last year, he had 101 total tackles for the Buffalo Bills. He had a whole sack as well. And he kind of looked like a linebacker the way he was just playing in the middle of the field. He played 419 snaps in the box last year, 313 at free safety, and 197 at slot cornerback while being on the field each and every game for the Buffalo Bills. What I see here, Josh, and as we talk more about the safety team in general, is someone who the Dolphins are going to have no issue putting in the middle of the field. Maybe having that one-on-one matchup against that number 3 option who Justice Hill running free for a 50-yard touchdown reception. These are the type of scenarios I think Jordan Poyer could help a lot. I don't know if I'd feel comfortable having him play another 419 snaps in the box, which is absolutely bananas to me. But overall, man, I think this is a player who's going to come in and really warp position groups for the Miami Dolphins. I think we're going to start to see Jalen Ramsey be a hybrid cornerback safety, and someone like Jordan Poyer kind of feels like a hybrid linebacker safety.
Yeah, I mean, you just touched on it right there. I mean, I think that's kind of what makes this a little bit more exciting. I mean, last year we all got excited about Vic Fangio. I'll be the first one to admit I was banging that drum, but it almost seemed like he was just stuck in his ways. And we've already heard Mike McDaniel talk about Anthony Weaver having, having a similar coaching approach where they're, thinking outside the box, trying to, utilize these different pieces. So I'm excited to see them use Jalen Ramsey almost as we've heard from that Athletic article, right? As a solar system type guy that everyone kind of rotates around him. I mean, I'm sitting here saying temper your expectations with Jordan Poyer, but like you mentioned, he truly doesn't seem like he's lost a step, quote unquote, right? I mean, he can come in here and be, can start for the Dolphins and be that impact in the middle, like you said, Jake. But like you said, you're sitting here depending on him to play X amount of snaps, not having someone necessarily behind him. That has to make you a little bit queasy. But again, I'm enticed to see, or intrigued to see the way they utilize these different guys. Because like you said, they can move them around all over the defense, and how you attack an offense, and it can get really interesting. And it's not really what we saw out of Vic Fangio. So hopefully Anthony Weaver can, pull back some of the layers and utilize some of these chess pieces, quote unquote.
I just wanted to continue to play football again. I know I can still play at a high level. I know I can still help teams win football games. I essentially watched Miami for the last 7 years, and I lived 20 minutes away in the off season out here. So it was a perfect fit, and I'm excited to be here. Extremely excited to be here. So Poyer was released by the Buffalo Bills on March 6th. 1 year into a freshly signed 2-year, $12 million contract he earned with the Bills. He needed just 6 days between being released by the Bills and to be signed by the Dolphins. 6 days, that's all it took for him to agree to that deal. Just to kind of add a little bit of context here, this is someone who's been an absolute jack of all trades. I'd even say he mastered a few for the Buffalo Bills. Each of the last 4 seasons, he's been a team captain. Each of the last 4 seasons, the Buffalo Bills have finished first in the AFC East. Josh, everybody loves analytics, but when you kind of hear that the team captain each of the last 4 years, the fact that Buffalo was trailing Miami by 3 games with 5 to play at the end of last season, the Dolphins, I think, have done a pretty good job in the leadership category of bringing in some guys to step up. But what do you feel that someone like Jordan Poyer can bring? Someone who's been like growing up, man. I mean, it was always the Yankees were the who's your daddy for the Red Sox type thing. That's what the Bills have been for the Dolphins for the last 4 years. So what does it mean getting somebody who's going to come in and have an impact, who was kind of like, I don't want to say he was strictly the pulse, but part of that pulse that kept that Bills team on top for so long?
Yeah, I mean, I admittedly came into this trying to temper my expectations on a 33-year-old safety, but you're getting me way too excited, Jake, because you're right. Not only are you taking, like you mentioned, the pulse almost out of that defense, but now you're, bringing him into the Miami Dolphins locker room, a locker room that sounds like he almost wanted to be a part of from day one. So, I mean, you asked what it means. Not day one. He was with the Browns and Eagles when he first started. I did not even know he was with the Eagles. That was surprising. But it does mean
went from Oregon with Chip Kelly, then the Eagles with Chip Kelly. I never thought, and he was a 7th round pick. So you wonder if there was maybe that bias, and that's maybe the only reason sorry, Josh, I'm not to, but that goes to show how hard it is to make it in the NFL and how important it is for things to go right. Dude played at Oregon. He goes to Philadelphia as a 7th round pick, and we see all the time how 7th round picks struggle, lands there, sticks with the Browns for a couple years, and then makes it big with the Bills. I mean, it's just so goes to show you got to keep punching that wall, man. You're eventually going to break through it.
Yeah, and it goes to show, why we're not going to count this guy out at 33 years old, right? He wants that ring. He's hungry. You mentioned what it means. I mean, Deshaun Elliott, he was a veteran, right? Brandon Jones was a veteran, but now you're bringing in a 33-year-old vet, a guy who's worn that C for X amount of years. I'm excited to see what he can do for this defense, and to see, again, how some of these younger players, what he could maybe help them with their development, because we always hear iron sharpens iron. We always know bringing in these veteran guys who, are kind of wearing down what they can mean. I mean, Teddy Bridgewater is now a head coach, right, at Miami Northwestern. I joked about that today. So I'm intrigued to see what Jordan Poyer can do both on and off the field for this Miami Dolphins team and this Miami Dolphins locker room.
I should have put a little counter up because I'm going to keep mentioning this, dude. I don't think there's any scenario where I'd be comfortable with him playing 419 snaps inside the box for this Miami Dolphins team. But just mentioning how long he's been around the league, you can understand that he does a lot of different things. In 2022, last season, 429 snaps at free safety, 203 in the box, and 98 in the slot. 2021, his all-pro season, 564 snaps at free safety, 264 in the box, 86 at slot corner, and 65 on the defensive line, 1,114 snaps in total. Josh, how do you see maybe a Poyer Holland type secondary lining up? Because I don't think that Poyer has that identity, especially as a 33-year-old, maybe lining up in the slot against a Devon Achane or just one of those quick twitch guys. But what I see him doing is maybe patrolling that middle of the field. Those guys who break out, maybe they're into block and then they leak out, whether it be a tight end or a running back. Maybe it's that third option, that tight end coming over the middle. Those are the scenarios where I could see Poyer still being pretty special. And then I love seeing Jevon Holland lining up in the slot. Last season, I think I already said this, but 362 snaps at free safety, 121, at slot cornerback. I think if you can have Poyer being that middle of the field and then pulling a lever on each side, whether it would be Jevon Holland and Jalen Ramsey being that slot boundary balance, would be a lot of fun to watch, man.
Yeah, I mean, and that's why I'm sitting here, trying to continue to talk about what I think, Anthony Weaver can do to this, right? Can open things up for these guys. Because like you mentioned, Jevon Holland come down and play in the slot, as we saw in college. Jalen Ramsey can do that. Just having those pieces to move around. So you asked me what I think, would be best for Jordan Poyer. I don't want to just piggyback off what you said, but having him come down and be kind of that enforcer in the middle of the defense seems like your best bet, because like you mentioned, you're not going to have him, maybe covering a tight end or that speedy back, because those days are beyond him. But I do think there's a role for him, obviously, and he's going to be a difference maker on that defense. I mean, I do think this is, despite his age, I guess I would consider this an upgrade, right? I think this is an upgrade over what we saw to Brandon Jones and Deshaun Elliott last season, at least based off of the Jordan Poyer of old.
And that's what we hope we get. And I think the one weakness, quote unquote, I start to see is the Dolphins really look like a team that wants to beat teams over the middle. The way they're developing this roster, they want to be the team that can strong arm opponents over the middle, beat you one-on-one. Hell, if they got to give up a long shot deep, if another team's going to connect, it kind of seems like the way the Dolphins are built is if we got to give those up, we definitely will. But Josh, you mentioned this Anthony Weaver defense, and people forget Jordan Poyer was with Anthony Weaver all the way back in 2013 with the Browns. He was with Mike McDaniel all the way back in 2013 with the Browns. Poyer said, "We weren't very good, but it's crazy how full circle it comes around. I'm super proud of Weave for what he's been able to accomplish in the league, from playing and now coaching, working his way up as defensive coordinator." And then the rest of the coaches are really good coaches, honing in on all the details and just continuing to get better. Former 7th-round pick. He was first-team All-Pac-12 2012. I like having that type of chemistry. I think we kind of overdid it a little bit with Vic Fangio and in the past. But Josh, what are your thoughts knowing that Poyer's been around the league so long and he can kind of walk into this defense? Not necessarily, I don't want to lean into the cliche of being a coach on the field, but more understand what's supposed to be his roles, and more importantly, just kind of understanding the defense in general. He's preached the importance of OTAs, and he kind of feels like a leader, which isn't something you see often for $2 million.
Yeah, and I mean, and that's what I think is exciting, because you're not bringing in a guy that's a rookie, that might take more time to develop, start to get, used to the NFL game. This is a guy who's already played at a high level for X amount of years. Like you mentioned, started out as a little acorn with Chip Kelly. So it means everything. And I think it goes to show you just where the Dolphins are at, right? We're signing some of these veterans for, you look at this, you look at the Odell Beckham Jr. These guys want to come here. They want to finish their career with the Miami Dolphins and see if they can, do something that some of them have been chasing. Obviously not Odell Beckham, because he got one with Jalen Ramsey, but I think Jordan Poyer wants that ring, and I think he came here for a reason. So intrigued, Jake. Intrigued to see what this guy does, because like you mentioned, it goes so far beyond just the player on the field, because what he can do for that young team, do for any of them, even Jevon Holland. I mean, that's another guy you can just take under his wing, right? Who knows what part of Jevon Holland's game Jordan Poyer can open up.
Jordan Poyer has 22 interceptions since 2017, which is tied for 7th in the NFL since that time. 2017, his first season in Buffalo, starting next to Micah Hyde. For the Dolphins last season, they had 15 interceptions. The Ravens and Bills, Jordan Poyer was with the Bills. Anthony Weaver coming over from the Ravens. They were tied for 3rd with 18 each, matching the Browns, Saints, and Giants. Josh, how can Miami start to generate turnovers? You look at what they did last year. Jalen Ramsey led the league with 3 interceptions. Brandon Jones, Jerome Baker had 2 apiece. They're gone. Andrew Van Ginkel, Deshaun Elliott, Xavier Howell, Xavier Howell. I don't know who that is. Xavier Howard and Emmanuel Agba each had one of their own as well. So Josh, that's 2, 4. That's 8 interceptions right out the door. How can this Miami Dolphins defense generate pressure, generate turnovers, despite, Jalen Phillips, Bradley Chubb, 2 guys dealing with injuries? Something the Dolphins are going to have to overcome as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to come down to the secondary, right? We're not going to get some of those pressures that we saw last season. So I think for me, and it's been the cliche, it's been everything I've been talking about throughout this entire podcast, but it's the way that I think Anthony Weaver can utilize some of these guys, maybe mask what the defense is showing, right? If you show early on that you can move Jalen Ramsey around, play him in the slot, move him around with your number one corner, and then also show that Jevon Holland come down, play, in the slot, can also play safety. Now you're showing Jordan Poyer doing the same thing. Pre-snap, you can show all different sorts of looks. So I want to see the Dolphins get creative. I want to see that secondary really clamp down because, like you said, Jake, it was a few years ago, or maybe you didn't mention it, but we haven't had those turnovers like we did. I mean, it was one of those Flores years, right, where we got absolutely spoiled with like
Multiple
21
years,
or
I think. I think it was over a 2-year switch even, yeah.
Absolutely spoiled. And, it's a lot easier to generate points and to win games when you can create those turnovers. So I think bringing a guy like Jordan Poyer again is going to change everything for this defense. And I hope Anthony Weaver can get the most out of these players. So I don't think it's necessarily one thing, Jake. I am excited, though, for once you mentioned those pass rushers, fully healthy of Bradley Chubb and Jalen Phillips, what they can bring to this, to what that they can bring up front. I mean, then that's when this defense will be, all cylinders go. But how long are we going to have to wait to see that?
I gotta ask you, Josh. I don't think looking at the 2020 Houston Texans is really the best guiding light, if you will, for Anthony Weaver. So that was the last time he was defensive coordinator, and then he spent 3 years with the Baltimore Ravens, run game coordinator, assistant head coach. The Houston Texans, Josh, in 2020 had a league low 3 interceptions. No other team had fewer than 7. I thought there were times last year when you consider that Jalen Ramsey and Xavier Howard combined for 4 interceptions, a ball hawking duo combining for only 4 interceptions. I thought that was insane. I think if you wanted to really see the issue with the Vic Fangio defense, they were good at it. They had a great pressure rate, great sack rate. That's the one that really bothers me. I think they really could have forced more turnovers. I think they could have allowed offenses. I think they allowed offenses to get a little too comfortable, allowed opposing offenses to figure things out. So what do you want to see? What do you need to see week 1 or early in the season that's like, all right, the Vic Fangio, like my guy versus your guy is a thing of the past? Is it pre-snaps or what do you need to see?
I was gonna joke. It's just seeing Jalen Ramsey cross the line of scrimmage, like right, follow the receiver. Week 1. Let's just see that Jaguars. Who's their number 1 receiver right now? Did they let Ridley go, or did they
let
resign
Ridley
him?
go?
They let Ridley go.
Gabe Davis.
Yeah, and they drafted
Christian Kirk. Actually, the Jags are going to be awesome because they have a bunch of slot receivers and then the burners. I think that's the exact type of matchup that Miami should be interesting against. I like that.
Yeah, so all jokes aside, just watching Jalen Ramsey shadow a guy. But, I mean, they played a lot of zone last year, and I think, that wasn't necessarily to the strengths of some of these players. I mean, this year, maybe mixing it up more, seeing them go up there and disguise blitzes. I mean, I'm not sure, Jake, but I think what we'll see early on, even in just camp, preseason, some of these joint practices, those little clips we're going to see, I think we're going to notice that this defense isn't the same as Vic Fangio. And I think Anthony Weaver is going to, he's trying to change that narrative, right? Everyone looks back at his one stint with Houston. I mean, and then everyone looks and says, okay, well, he wasn't known for this or wasn't responsible for this in Baltimore. He's trying to shut all those naysayers up. So I'm intrigued.
The growth and direction of this team is so interesting, man, because I thought for sure that they would have added another safety by now. It's absolutely insane that Jordan Poyer has 11 years of experience, and he's currently the only safety the Dolphins have added this offseason with any previous NFL experience. Patrick McMorris, 6th-round rookie. There's a pair of undrafted rookies in Mark Perry and Jordan Colbert. I'm a big Jordan Colbert guy. You also have Nick Needham under contract, and he's cross-training at safety. But, Josh, I don't know if this is enough. Like, even with having Jordan Poyer come in and be, if he's an all-pro guy, are you truly comfortable having Jevon Holland, Jordan Poyer? Then maybe you got Nick Needham as your 3rd safety cross-training, and then you have a bunch of unknowns there outside of that.
No, not at all. It makes me queasy. I mean, I'm sitting here and I think we joked and I did the little voice when we first signed Anthony Weaver, and everyone's like, the Dolphins need three safeties for his defense to work. You know, the defense that he ran in Baltimore. Well, right now, I mean, you got one. We're sitting here talking about Jordan Poyer. I'm getting a little bit hyped, but he's here for 1 year, 33 years old. I mean, so they are going to have to rely heavily on Nick Needham, hopefully hitting. You know, Elijah Campbell, I think, was also listed at safety. I mean, I think I like a little bit of what I saw to Mark Perry, Patrick McMorris. You know, they're throwing acorns, they're throwing darts at these guys. I think they need to bring someone in, Jake. But even if they bring someone in, I mean, you're still then, you know, playing a dicey game. But I guess that's any NFL team, right? So definitely need to sign somebody because I don't know, unless Nick Needham's that superstar that we've heard of before and made a nice transition there, which who's to say he hasn't? Yeah, that unit needs some help.
Couple different positions here where it seems like we have an idea like this is what the Dolphins need and they're just completely going away from it, whether it's safety, whether it's guard. Those are the two that kind of stick out to me, and that's really like, what are we missing? What is the plan here? Are the Dolphins genuinely going to be comfortable having, you know, Jordan Poyer step in, be like a pseudo linebacker, and then if you have Jevon Holland kind of over all around the field, he's be great in like mesh concepts. If you have a stack of wide receivers, I think Jevon Holland's great at kind of reading what the offense is trying to do and trying to snuff out plays like that. But all of a sudden, man, I kind of look back in the deep end of the secondary and I see Clayton Fedulum getting absolutely roasted by Tyreek Hill in 2021, I think it was. There's just a scenario like that. You're wondering, like, man, what is this team going to do? You really aren't going to have Jalen Ramsey, even if you use him more as a safety this year. I don't think he's going to be your free safety all the way in the back. I don't know if Jordan Poyer is that guy. And I think Jevon Holland, you want lining up all over the field. So looking at how this defense is going to work, whether it's Nick Needham coming into the safety zone and being that guy, I'm not sure I completely buy it, just considering he was a slot guy. It's not often you see those guys have that makeup type speed. They're more down low because they have that quick twitch. But it just seems like if the Dolphins are going to have a weakness, it's like they're kind of accepting it's going to be on the boundaries and deep, which is a little scary facing guys like Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes, the guys with the stronger arm. But I'm a little relieved to see, like, Josh, they're going to pack the paint, if you will. They're going to pack the middle of the field, get Jalen Ramsey in there, get Jordan Poyer in there. And then you have David Long, Jordan Brooks kind of solidifying what they can do against the run. That's where I see this Dolphin strength is going to be. It's really preventing anyone from attacking that middle of the field one way or another.
Yeah, and I mean, we're talking about our secondary, and I just got to throw Kendall Fuller's name out there just because we haven't even talked about him at all, just to, you know, not let him feel so left out. But yeah, Jake, I do think that they're maybe just waiting. I think how many more days is there in this month? June 1st is coming up, right? So they do have some money that they might play with that maybe that's what they're waiting for. But yeah, you got to have a plan, man. You have to hope that one of those acorns can really stand out, or hope that Nick Needham's proven that he can cross train. I mean, the intriguing thing with him is, like you said, he is a slot guy. He has played on the boundary. So there's even some versatility there that, you know, they could get a little bit creative with. But right now, man, I feel like they're looking at, you know, guard. They're looking at defense tack. They're looking at the safety position. They're just waiting. They have to have someone on speed dial. We hope that, you know, they're going to call up as soon as that money hits their bank account. But maybe they're going to go to war and let these guys battle it out. But they need some help there at safety. And I don't know, Jake, do you have anybody in mind?
The Dolphins, as of Saturday, are going to be getting about $18 million in salary cap space after making the tough decision to move on from Xavier Howard. Safety instantly is one position that comes to mind that the Dolphins could use help. I think they'd love somebody, just a track star back there. I thought Bobby McCain was actually a really good free safety for the Miami Dolphins. So you wonder, or you hope, Nick Needham can maybe become that guy, Josh. But why not push the chips into the table and sign someone like Justin Simmons, a 3-time All-Pro with the Broncos? He's turning 31. The ideal short-term option because he was cut by the Denver Broncos. And Josh, you mentioned it earlier in the pod. Players like Jordan Poyer are coming to Miami to help them win games. Guys like Odell Beckham Jr. are coming to Miami to win games. Justin Simmons has never appeared in the playoffs. I think the Dolphins have a great opportunity to really get those guys who are looking to take that next step. I think, you know, you get someone like Justin Simmons, if you can convince them like Odell Beckham, come in here, play on a 1-year deal. Simmons at 31, maybe one more monster year could get another contract out of it. So that'd be my first pick, Josh, with $18 million coming in on June 1st. I think that'd be the best way to improve the Dolphins. Go out and get someone like Justin Simmons.
Yeah, he's that hot name, right? I mean, I think everyone has sat here and at
Yep.
least, kind of brought his name up. So, I mean, that's exactly where I was going to go. I mean, this is a guy who has been a playmaker ever since he's come in the league, right? I think he's played 15 games last year, 67 total tackles. This dude's a playmaker, 8 pass breakups. So, this would be that perfect signing that I think if you bring him in, like you mentioned, maybe incentives, things like that, that he comes in with, his eye on, helping Jevon Holland, Jordan Poyer become that shut down secondary. I mean, you add Justin Simmons, and then, I'm starting to feel a lot differently about, everything that we talked about.
It'd be an absolute game changer. And I think looking back to last year, you can never predict the injuries. You can absolutely never predict the injuries. And having someone as a backup like Justin Simmons, the capability to come in, I don't want to hate on Brandon Jones. He got absolutely paid. He got a 3-year contract with the Denver Broncos. But it did seem like when Deshaun Elliott and Jevon Holland were both dealing with injuries last year, it was like, we were cool with Brandon Jones. He started for multiple years with the Dolphins, but Josh, I don't think we were ever like, hell yeah. Like, I'm not trying to be a hater here whatsoever, but I don't think we were ever like seeing Brandon Jones push above maybe as like 78 grade in Madden or something like that. We always knew he had some flaws to his game that could lose the Dolphins a couple drives.
Yeah, I mean, we could say we didn't expect him to get that type of contract either. I mean,
Yeah.
that we did not expect that. So we were all excited about Brandon Jones. I'm sure I hyped him up, and as his box type safety, I could come down and lay the wood a little bit. But yeah, we weren't too overly hyped, and I still cannot believe he made that contract. Which, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the Dolphins get 7th round comp center.
I think for him, it's been canceled out. So I think the Dolphins are in line to get 3 compensatory picks, 2/3 and a 7th. The 7th from Deshaun
Okay,
Elliott. I think
Elliott.
the 6th, the Dolphins were actually going to get a 6th-rounder for Brandon Jones, but I believe it was the Aaron Brewer contract, the former Tennessee Titans center.
My
When the
bad.
Dolphins signed him to a 3-year deal, I think that canceled out. But no, man, you're right. They would have gotten a pick for Brandon Jones, which is something nobody would ever see when shaking their Magic 8-ball.
No, not at all. No, that's just crazy. And there's Micah Hyde's out there. I mean, that's another guy who I guess
I think he's thinking retirement, or he might be
is
back with the
he?
Bills, but I think it's either Bills or retirement for him. Dude,
Of
going
course.
through the clips for for Jordan Poyer, do you remember the play? I think it was 2019 when the Dolphins tried an onside kick against the Bills. Micah Hyde caught it, did a 360, and just ran the other way for a touchdown. It was the most Dolphins play ever, dude.
Dolphins thing, yeah, everything. Yeah, you're sitting here thinking they still have hope, and then they just run. Yeah, my God, it was so like no one even. Damn it, Jake.
Another player I think the Dolphins could use this money on. So you wonder, all right, we're going to improve. Like one of the greatest coach lines of all time. It's like you kick down the door into the office building and you have this huge board meeting with like 15 people. You're like, listen, Josh, we're going to improve the secondary by improving the trenches, by adding edge rushers. That's going to speed up the clock of quarterbacks. Am I really here about to hype up 38-year-old Calais Campbell, Josh? Can I do that, or are you just going to kick me out here?
No, I mean you may as well do that, right? I mean that's what we're here for, and it's Calais Campbell, who a guy who we all sat here and I know it's going to bring back bad memories, but he's the one that took Tannehill out, right? Wasn't he the one that took Tannehill out that led us to Matt Moore? So comes full circle. But you mentioned the adding, making the defense better by adding pressure up front. That's the Bradley Chubb theory, right? Isn't that what the Dolphins did when our secondary started, to fall apart? So 38 years old, man, it'd be one of those same things, right? And I think he has some experience I think you have written down here. He has some experience with Anthony Weaver, correct? In
2
Baltimore, 2
years
years, I
with
believe.
Baltimore. Yeah.
So, I mean, this would definitely help out up front. I just, relying on a 38-year-old, he doesn't want to play it. It doesn't want anything to do with OTAs though, right? I bet he wants nothing to do with that stuff.
That is the kicker, Josh. Something like I wanted to talk about this in a coming pod, but there was a guard that the Dolphins were talking to and said we'll be in touch after the draft. Not only they stay after the draft, but it's also after the draft and OTAs and all the other offseason BS, right? They do not want to deal with any of this. Part of the reason I was so shocked Odell Beckham Jr. signed as early as he did was partially because it was only $3 million, quote unquote only. And two, because like you think Odell wants to be there for OTAs and the mini camps. No, absolutely not. So Calais Campbell makes a lot of sense. Somebody a little later in camp. He's a bigger dude. It's a lot of work for him to get back in shape, but he still has gas in the tank, man. He led the Falcons with 6.5 sacks last season. Obviously, the Dolphins had Christian Wilkins, Zach Sealer, and Bradley Chubb all flirting around with 10 sacks each. But I genuinely think the Dolphins could use an anchor there on the edge, especially with Bradley Chubb, Jalen Phillips working them way back, and then just having that familiarity with the system that was being ran in Baltimore. I think Calais Campbell makes a lot of sense just as a stabilizing presence, even if, he's not going to give you 17 full weeks. The Dolphins don't need 17 full weeks. And I think it'd be interesting to see what you could do with Jalen Phillips, Bradley Chubb pass rush, and then all of a sudden a changeup of a Calais Campbell, a savvy vet like Calais Campbell in December, man. That sounds like such a fun project for Anthony Weaver to work on.
Yeah, and Shaq Barrett too. I mean, then you're starting to get these different pieces that you can, start to utilize. So, and he probably knows his defense pretty well, so you can probably take your time with that. So, I'm all here for Calais Campbell. I think him and Justin Simmons have been the real two big names that we've heard. Another one on the defense. I'm just gonna throw it out there since we're still talking defense, but I want to give a shout out to Philip Dillingham on Twitter, a guy who, if you follow him, he is always on draft prospects early. But he threw out Carl Lawson's name, who again, I guess a similar situation, defensive end. Started 14 games with the Bengals over his first 4 seasons. Then he went to the Jets. And in 2022, this guy had 7 sacks, 24 pressures. So he's 28 years old. He didn't really do much last season with the Jets, but that's another defensive end that's out there that if the Dolphins wanted to bring in a pass rusher who has shown over time that he can be, a different piece, a different, asset to throw at a quarterback, that maybe Carl Lawson's another name.
Not to one up anyone here. I definitely appreciate you bringing that up, Josh, because on April 10th, I have open here the Finsider on April 10th that somebody named Jacob Mendel shared a report that former Jets defensive end Carl Lawson actually visited with the Miami Dolphins. So I absolutely love where Phillips going. I think there's a little connection there. This is someone the Dolphins have already spoke with. This is someone who I know there's already a number in place what Carl Lawson is willing to play on. That's a good choice too of dude, he's 10 years younger than Calais Campbell. 28 compared to 38. And shout out Cat for being the guy who kind of got us on the Calais Campbell bandwagon. But man, I like the idea of Carl Lawson. I think that's a great suggestion. The Jets signed him to a 3-year, $45 million deal following the 2020 season. Dealt with some injuries, and then the Jets kind of reloaded the unit where he could never really find his footing. I think that'd be a great player to bring in on a prove-it deal, 28 years old. He's looking to get another contract, man. I like the way you're thinking.
Well, it was the way Phil was thinking by a hat tweet to you as well, because I mean, how we've been interested in everyone, so I guess I should have known that the Dolphins had some type of interest in Carl Lawson. Another player the Dolphins have interest in, and this is a guy who I want to say I keep pumping keep throwing out there every time we're sitting here talking about center or guard. I keep throwing Connor Williams' name out there, and I did just do a recent roundtable with Omar Kelly, the Miami Herald. Go check that out. But he said that he thinks that maybe, and he just threw this out there, that maybe there was some type of insurance policy that Connor Williams, doesn't have, there's no real incentive for him to work his way back and still continue to play football. And we've also heard from Drew Rosenhaus, as I've written here, that he said he had a significant knee injury. Without getting into his private business, it was a significant injury. He's taking his time to rehab. I don't think there's an immediate plan to sign with the Dolphins or any team right now. I think he's focused on his medical situation. I think even Mike McDaniel himself said the two sides are still in communication, but it does sound like maybe Connor Williams is closer to retirement. But if he were to come back, man, we saw he could play center. He was an elite guard before that. Dolphins need help in the interior offensive line. I keep going back to Connor Williams. That would be my that's the guy I want to see him sign. With all the problems they have, I want to hear that Connor Williams is doing good and wants to come back and battle through it, because the dude could play. He could absolutely play, and I think this would be the perfect piece for the Dolphins offensive line.
Dude, I even love it. Like, I hope it's not this bad. I pray to God it's not this bad, but we only can go. We don't know anything. Well, I don't know anything. I'm an idiot podcaster. I'll be the first to tell you that. Absolute worst case scenario with how much they're talking about getting healthy, worried about the medical situation. Absolute worst case scenario, I'd love to see the Dolphins give Connor Williams the Alex Smith treatment. Right, Alex Smith came back. He had the most gruesome knee injury ever shown on TV. And I think that's kind of what's so shocking about Connor Williams. It did seem like it was another, let's go to commercial break and then it was over type of thing. I think that's why it's so jarring. But I'd love for the Dolphins to give him his opportunity, even if it just means he's going to play 2 more games, maybe even just have a couple reps at the end of a game. I think he's been such a big part for the Dolphins these last couple of years. The ability to step in and instantly help pull up a unit by its bootstraps that has always been one of the biggest issues in the Miami Dolphins. A lot of fandom coming out here, but I think that'd be like the bare minimum of what the Dolphins should do with him. Otherwise, put him at the top of my list. If you're telling me that Connor Williams wants to play football and can come back, maybe have an impact for the second half of the season, he'd be 1A on my list with this $18 million the Dolphins are going to get from like Jevon Holland, without a doubt.
And lastly, Jake, we're sitting here talking about guard. Connor Williams would be so nice to see his, comeback story, to sit there and root for him and watch him progress. But the guy, and you mentioned it earlier, that the Dolphins were talking to a veteran guard. I don't know if it's ever been confirmed. I don't know if there are reports out there, but it may have been Dalton Risner. I know a lot of people kind of have been linking those two sides together. And maybe it's because, I looked it up, and him and Butch Berry, their paths did cross in 2022. Risner spent 4 seasons with the Broncos, started 73 out of 77 of the games that he's played in at guard. So clear upgrade over Liam Eichenberg. I like what Jack Driscoll can do. That battle there. Lester Cotton proved that he can play. But if you look at that Dolphins offensive line, besides the center position, I think we had, it was Boldinger that said he didn't like Aaron Brewer, right? But Aaron Brewer, yeah. So if you're looking at that, we still could use help up front. I think, bringing in a guy like Dalton Risner could solidify that guard spot, help out whoever's there at center if it's Aaron Brewer, and let's get this thing going. What are your thoughts on Dalton Risner?
I have a hard time seeing a scenario where the Dolphins have Liam Eichenberg as the starting right guard and the backup center. I think if that's the scenario the Dolphins are going into, I think they need to do everything in their power to sign Dalton Risner. However, if someone like Jack Driscoll is showing up, somebody who's been around the league for a while, someone who has starting experience, if he's kind of showing up to practice and understands the system and can really be integrated, have him start at right guard. I just don't want to see another scenario where you have Liam Eichenberg jumping all over the place. He hasn't strung together the greatest stretch of a couple few seasons, and this is a personal bias of mine. We've had Mark Schlerathon, we've had Brian Baldinger, who have all said different things about how, players who play on the left side going to the right side or switching from guard to tackle. I would want just one season before we finish throwing all the dirt on Liam Eichenberg, burying him. I'd like to see him get 1 year at just one position. And let's see what happens without the musical chairs. And if the Dolphins are going forward with Eichenberg at right guard and as the backup center, I'm really going to have to throw hands with Chris Greer. Not a threat. Obviously.
Look at you being all mature though, and trying to give Liam Eichenberg, a chance at one spot, which I don't know that he's ever really truly had a chance at one spot. And let's be honest, we give Butch Berry a lot of credit, but Liam Eichenberg looks suitable at guard. I think we've even seen Robert Jones, Isaiah Wynn at times look suitable at guard. But if you bring in a guy like Risner, we talked about Connor Williams, if he were to bounce back, that'd be a clear upgrade there. And then you just let Liam Eichenberg work at one position, like you said. But just seeing that he is a starter at guard, like you mentioned, and then he is the backup center, and just thinking about the never-ending injuries and musical chairs we suffered through last season. Oh, man, to think Liam Eichenberg may even start one game at center would just be absolutely terrifying, and I'm ready just to delete this entire pod.
The Dolphins have just under $2 million in salary cap space as of this recording on May 28th. That number will quote-unquote balloon. They'll have about $20 million in total cap space come June 1st by moving on from Jevon Holland as a post-June 1st salary cut. Josh, just to kind of wrap up this discussion here, I wouldn't necessarily say the Dolphins even should go out and sign anyone. When you look ahead to 2025, the team is already $11 million over the salary cap. That's without having a franchise quarterback under contract for next season. So despite some interesting names out there, I want to be the friendly reminder, the parents saying, hey, maybe you should save your money because the Dolphins don't have a lot of it.
Yeah, and you're talking about franchise quarterback, but then you got the wide receiver 2 that's really a wide receiver 1, the elite pass rusher, the elite safety, and the list keeps going on and on. So, yeah, man, maybe we should save that money or keep it break in case of emergency. We'll see. We're going to finish this recording before it's even out, and they're going to sign somebody, guaranteed.
Later this week, if you are subscribed to this podcast, which you should be, if not, we're checking. You will see on this feed a 53-man roster projection with Cat later this week. I think we're eyeing to record that Thursday for Friday. Then over the weekend, we will record a mailbag episode to drop that on Monday for you guys. The Dolphins are continuing OTAs. There's some mandatory mini camps coming up. I think that's June 4th through 6th. So make sure you're subscribed to this podcast, iTunes, Spotify, 560 WQAM on YouTube. Wherever you listen to your podcast, you can find us there. And don't forget, send your questions, comments, thoughts to AnotherDolphinsPodcast@gmail.com. That is it. That is all the time we have today on Another Dolphins Podcast. Thank you all so much for joining us. We will be back soon with another episode, but until then,
Fins up.